GenFriends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And with me, I have Melissa Barker, the archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, hello. Hope everybody's doing well after this Merry Christmas.
So glad that you're here. And Dan Earl, our family history guy, is here. Hey, Dan.
Hello.
Good to have you. And Laura Hedgecock from Treasure Chest of Memories is here. Hey, Laura, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Cheri?
Good, good. Well, we have asked Laura if she will lead us in a discussion tonight because, you know, it is Treasure Chest of Memories, right? So here we are. At the time we're recording this, we're almost to the end of 2020. We're almost to New Year's Eve and starting a new year. So we thought, let's talk a little bit about collecting memories, preserving memories. If you haven't been doing so well with that, maybe some ideas to do better, to be more intentional about doing that in the next year. So Laura, take it away, girl. What do you got for us?
Well, let's find out where our panel is to begin with, who I know I'm a big fan of it, but where the rest of you stand on your own past, writing about your own stories and memories versus family stories or ancestor stories.
Yeah, not as good as I want to be. Not as good as I want to be. I mean, I'm one of those that at the beginning of the year, I set goals. I'm going to write a journal. I'm going to do all this stuff. And January 15th, I still haven't done anything. So that's where I am.
So it's not the holding forth, it's the getting started.
It's actually doing it. I come up with great ideas, but it's actually doing it. That's my problem.
What about you, Dan?
I'll call it a lapsed journalist. So just like some people are lapsed Catholics and they only go to church on Christmas and Easter. So I'm a lapsed journalist. So I will write in my journal, but only on the high holy days. And so only when something tremendously important happens will I usually jot it down in my journal. And but the day-to-day stuff I just don't write down, and I've tried to capture some memories and things like that, but most of it's oral history that I'm passing on to my kids, because then the stories get better over the years instead of just staying, well, this is the truth because it's written down, right? They can add to it, and the fish gets bigger every single time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What about you, Melissa?
I keep a journal. Although I'm looking at my journal, and the last date I wrote in it was Sunday, October the 25th. So
2020?
2020.
Okay,
I'm actually in this year. So I've been keeping a journal for many, many years, but it's like I'll be really, really good for a real long time, and then I have gaps, you know. And as far as my ancestor stories, I'm kind of like the cobbler with the knitting shoes kind of thing. I don't ever get time to do my own research, which means I don't ever have time to sit down and do my ancestor stories. And I keep telling myself every year, this year's going to be the year where I take that time. I make the time to do this. And every year I don't. So,
you know, I was so good about it when I was a teenager. Man, I've got
we had energy then.
Someone looked at me today in the hall, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I know good about that when I was a teenager, but you know.
Oh my gosh, I burned my teenage diary. It's like, really? I was like so self-absorbed. I don't even want to face it myself.
No, we all were, but it's been fun to show my kids, you know, when they're going through those kind of things. And I'll say, you think that's bad? Look at this. I'll let them read it. So.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that will help you get going is it's fun to show the kids. It is fun later, but it is delayed gratification because we do it for the future. True. And it's not like something that we can bake a cake and then, an hour and a half later, we get to taste it or what have you. But we're not that unusual. I mean, a lot of family historians will do a lot more to document other people's past than their own.
That's so true.
The whole reason I started a journal years and years ago was because I didn't have any journals from my ancestors. or diaries
I
or
don't
scrapbooks or letters. I didn't have anything like that. I still don't have anything like that. And so it made me think, you know, I don't want my descendants, who probably are like, we could care less, but I don't want my descendants to say, well, she never left a thing and she was a genealogist, you know. And so I started keeping a journal, and I've got, you know, several of these journals packed away. But that's why I started it. But, you know, it's difficult to keep going and keep it on a regular basis.
And I'm the opposite of you. I started back keeping one because my grandmother did keep one. And I don't want to give too much away. This is what two of the Roots Tech Talks are about. So I don't want to give everything away. But really, a lot of it is, I know what it's like to receive it. And I know how that changes the connections. And honestly, my grandmother died when I graduated from college. So I was still in that very self-absorbed kind of state of mind. And I had her in her pigeonhole, the grandma pigeonhole.
Oh, sure.
Not the three-dimensional woman kind of pigeonhole. So I never had that woman-to-woman relationship with her in life. But through her journals, through her stories, I have. And so as I aged, she didn't, but her stories were there. And so when I had kids, I had her stories of watching her kids grow on the farm where they had no money, sometimes not enough food. So I could help me get over these neurotic, oh my God, is he going to go to jail because, you know, whatever happened at school. And, you know, she wrote even prayers of lament. She talked about how much she loved my grandpa. So then I connect to her as a wife. And also, like, and it didn't have to be long. Like, she wrote about the baby that was stillborn in 1929. It's probably a paragraph. And she wrote something about her beloved little redheaded boy and how much she still missed him. She was 74 when she wrote it.
Oh, wow.
So it doesn't have to be great writing. It doesn't have to be long and involved. You connect. And I just see that as such a gift to know someone who loved me unconditionally, but I didn't understand what a gift it was at the time. So I just knowing that gift, I know I have to write. And then just with Christmas time being here and talking to the kids, and they want to go over the same stories over and over. And Dan, they don't change. Boys try to get them to change. Like, Josh, with my little stitches thing, Josh is like, didn't I have to get stitches 4 times? And I'm like, 5 times? I'm like, no, honey, it was 4. We're going to keep it at 4. But yes, you were the one that I had to, you know, alternate emergency rooms there for a couple of years because you don't want to keep taking the same child to the same emergency room over and over. And they like hearing those stories that they've heard over and over. So
my dad had really good stories like that. He was the typical 50s teenager with a pack of cigarettes rolled, you know. I mean, that was my dad. Honestly, it was my dad. And he swears if he hadn't met my mom, he would have ended up in jail because he wasn't doing anything bad at the time. I mean, just trickster kind of things, you know, just playing jokes. Like they went to a gas station once and told the attendant, because of course, you know, at that time they would come and pump your gas for you, you know.
Wow.
One of the boys had his arm hanging out of the trunk and they had put ketchup all over it, and they asked the attendant if he had a shovel. I mean, they would do things like that.
Oh, wow.
So
and is that written down somewhere?
It's recorded. I have him talking about them on tape. So
that's good.
Yeah. So all my kids know those stories because they've heard him tell it, and I've got it on tape. But there's so many other things that I wish, you know, they pass on, and there's so many things that you wish you would have asked them or had them write down. And I'm trying to encourage my mom to write some things now, and it's hard to get her just write them down because I have recorded. I've interviewed her and recorded some of her things. But
what about if you and her did a little thing together where you were kind of writing partners? You'll write down your memories. She writes down hers.
Oh, that'd be
you can
great.
read them back and forth. I mean, memories do beget memories when you talk. So then you give her some accountability to you.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then you guys can trade off and even share.
I like that idea. And we've talked on the show before about using photos, using pictures to encourage memories. So
pictures are great. And especially looking at those details in the background. What was it? I mean, that will cue you into some of the sensory things. Was it a hot summer day? Everybody's wearing short sleeves.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's when we went in the station wagon. It was on air conditioning. You know, you go and you get more details that fill in, or some technology that was there that isn't there anymore.
Right.
That can help a lot.
One thing I did several years ago, and now several of my family members are gone, but I'm glad I did this. I took I started on January 1, and I emailed a photograph every day to the family members that wanted to participate. There were probably 15, my mom, dad, aunt and uncles, cousins, and things like that. And I sent a photograph every day for the entire year.
I love that.
And I just asked them, I didn't say anything about the photograph. All I said was, just tell me what you know about the photograph, who, what, when, where, anything that you can think of at all. And I did this for an entire year, and then I stopped because it was just, I just stopped. And they wanted more. I said, we need to keep doing this, but they loved it. You know, I wasn't shoving it in their face and demanding that they tell me what they know. I was just sending it every day. They could look at it at their leisure, and then they would email me back with everything that they knew if they didn't know anything. And so I have all of those emails from those entire years for those 365 photographs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I believe in prompts, and in my book too, there's a lot of, it's not really prompts, it's subject matters. It's kind of progresses from things that are easy to write about to things that are more difficult to write about. But prompts can be very, very helpful. I mean, that's part of StoryCorps. They start out with prompts. And I think StoryCorps are very good because they're also things that promote conversations. So you could also take the angle of what would I want, what I want you to remember about me.
Oh, sure.
And not just, this is what happened, not that anything's wrong with those things of this is just what happened, but sometimes, you know, put your heart in it. And what is it that they might have missed about you? Dan, you look really thoughtful.
Well, I am. I'm just wondering, like, how do you turn some stories into something other than a cautionary tale, right, for your descendants? Like, don't do what I did. They're still interesting and fun stories, and it seems like those are the stories that my kids gravitate to, the ones that I usually stop with. Well, and that's when the police showed up, and then that's
like my dad's stories, yes.
Right, yeah, and that's where we sort of end it, you know. But I'm wondering, like, is there a way to frame that in something other than a cautionary tale?
Well, I think what was there? I'll use a totally different example. I'll take one of Matt's uncles who got drunk every 4th of July at the family reunion. He did funny things. He the biggest thing he did was he went to the dock, he'd set his chest hair on fire, and he'd jump in the lake. So you could also look at that about, was there something about being with the family that brought that out? Was there like alcoholism that ran in the family? Were there things that were unaddressed? I mean, you can make it into a deeper story, or just, it could be a kid acting out that never believed anything could happen to him. I mean, but yeah.
I think my dad helped with those stories because he would then stop and say, after he told them all and everybody was laughing at all the crazy things that he did, he would then say, and if I hadn't met your mother, so it was like, you know, if I hadn't met your mother by, you know, coming into the football game and the police were chasing him, the cop was chasing him because he didn't pay to get in the game, although he had the money in his pocket. For Dad, everything was a game. So he gets in and he goes, and the only seat he could see empty was right next to my mom.
Yeah, I think too, you know, your audience. I mean, if he knew all his kids weren't going to go emulate the crazy things he did, if you have the kind of kids that are already doing it, it probably is not the time in life to tell them, oh yes, I too got arrested. Or, you know, I too was in the principal's office. I mean,
For the record, I've never been arrested. So let's just clarify that. I've never been arrested. So
I'm sure you've been in the principal's office.
I may have been in the principal's office.
That's where you had to go when you had to call mom because you were sick.
Right. Oh, yeah, of course. That's exactly right. You know,
That's all it was. That's all it was.
there was never any instances of me, doing anything on the playground that would necessitate a trip to the principal's office to meet my parents there for disciplinary purposes. Nothing like that.
But I think too, we also, I mean, sometimes a story is just a story. It doesn't have to be a huge momentous deal. And sometimes they are. And I think as genealogists and telling family stories and telling our own, we really overlook the moments. And some of those really, really matter. And it's funny, I feel really sad sometimes. I'll look at some of these moments that I remember from my parents, and they probably never knew they were special moments to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I never wrote them down until after they left. But sometimes it's just sitting on the deck at the lake on a sunny day, watching the shimmers on the surface of the water, and just realizing you had a really good day, or realizing something happened and for once you were a good parent. Unlike most of the times when you just went hysterical.
Yeah, right.
You were a good parent that day.
I have started, last couple of years, I started doing a bullet journal to help keep myself organized. And in the last year, I started writing. One of the prompts that I give myself to make sure I'm on track is to think about something good that happened that day. What was a blessing for that day? That kind of thing do I want to remember, And so that helps. So it's not a full big journal, but I've got something written down every day. Sometimes I really have to stretch, to think of something. It is 2020. But
I keep my I live by a calendar, and sometimes I think when I'm not here, people are going to look at it and go, man, this woman, she never breathed. But that's what, and so I have my calendars, I have my diaries, but, Laura, what kind of advice do you have for 2020? As an archivist, I know that there are a tremendous amount of archives out there that are trying to actually gather stories from citizens so that they can kind of, I guess, do like a time capsule or do a collection so that 100 years from now, people will know what it was like for us to live through COVID if COVID's still,
right
here.
Right. I actually have two posts and we can reference them. One is about why you should keep a COVID journal, and the other one about scrapbooking about COVID. And looking back, because I think I wrote them in April or May, I think we may be at it would even be worth doing towards the end of this experience, because I think we're all at a different place now than we were in April and May.
Oh, sure.
In April and May, we were deer in the headlights, and that was an interesting story. I'm not saying don't write it.
I mean, what was your? It was going to be over. We thought, short.
We didn't understand. I mean, I know one of the things my experience was, because I work with the church as the technology person, I realized what a technology gap we have between generations, and working so hard to bust that. And then, because Michigan was hard hit, knowing people, like just watching the numbers going up, and you couldn't hardly I could care less whether I had toilet paper. People were dying.
Yeah.
And then, so you get to a different place during the same 9-month, 1 year, 18-month experience that we're going to end up having. So I think it's really our testament to history. Each of us has a different one. Well, Dan's not far from me, but we're from different states. We've seen different mortality rates. We've had different friends that may have been affected. So it's this conglomerate thing that's the history, but it can only be told through individual stories. There's not necessarily a stereotypical American, European, Australian, whatever experience of the pandemic. We each have our own.
I think that's with any historic event that happens in our world, if it's a world event, or even within our own country. Take the 1918, influenza, people wrote about it then. And we have those writings now. But if you read it, it's different for those different. It's like one thing that I use a lot sometimes in my teaching with genealogists is the Depression, the Great Depression. Because, you know, all you have to look at is just simple from north to south. Because I talked to my husband's grandmother at length about the Depression because I didn't have anyone at that generation that I could talk to other than her. And she lived here on this property where we live now. And she says, you would never have known that we had a Depression because they grew everything that they ate. They raised everything that they ate. All they had to buy was like sugar and coffee and tobacco. That's it, you know. And so they, you know, there was a Depression, but it wasn't like my family who lived in the city, who were on the bread lines, you know, that couldn't grow their own food, who couldn't, you know, take care of their people. And so, you know, that you don't have to go back that far to look at, everyone's going to have a different experience. And it's important. I think it's important that we try to record all the experiences. That's why it's important that all of us record our experiences.
Yeah. And really too, I mean, I worked from home beforehand. So my day-to-day existence didn't change. There are people that didn't want to go to work but had no choice.
I just say my coworkers. I had coworkers where I didn't have coworkers before because my husband was home. My kids were home at the very beginning when everything closed down, and so that was my change. Was that I had coworkers?
But there were other people. Like I know somebody who was a grocery store clerk. And she had to work to support her family, but she was also terrified about what she was going to bring home. Those kinds of stories. So I agree that it's definitely a story we should all be telling because while it's ripe, while we know what it was, because our memories will fade.
I also think it helps with our mental health. You know, 2020, I think is going to go down as a year of some significant mental health issues for some people. There are people out there that, and I'm not one of them, I could be a hermit, but there are people out there that have a hard time. They have had the hardest time staying home and being away from people because they're people. And they have to have that. And it has really, really, really hurt a lot of people from the mental aspect. And I really worry about those people. And so, you know, that's something too that I think is going to be with a lot of people for some time, even after all this.
Well, and that's an interesting, because that kind of is one of my soapboxes too, is I don't feel like all our journals, all our stories need to be ponies and rainbows.
No.
I think when we pass something down, it doesn't have to be a whine fest. But there should be some degree of honesty.
Sure.
And I suffer with anxiety and depression myself. So I'm really cautious when people are saying, oh, I don't want to say anything negative or whatever. Sometimes the way you feel is the way you feel.
I think we do our ancestors or our descendants a disservice.
I agree.
If we just give them the you know, the jams and jellies of our lives.
Oh, I like that saying.
You know, we should get, I'm always about the truth, especially, you know, I tell my genealogy students, I say, you know, whatever you find, it's the truth, you know, and we can work through it and we can understand it and we can digest it as best we can and we can move on. But, you know, we should know that because whatever has happened to our ancestors, whatever has happened with us, it is because it makes us who we are and why we make the decisions we make, why we move where we move, why we do what we do. And I don't know, I'm with you, Laura. I think that just telling it the way it is.
Right. And I'm like you, I know people, and a couple of them live alone and are older, so they're not super technical. They're not all hooked up. And so this has been very trying. I mean, Dan probably wishes he could go out for other reasons because he's been with his family.
Yeah, we take mental health walks, my wife and I. So we'll just go out for a walk and then leave the kids here. And we just don't go far enough where we wouldn't be able to see the smoke if the house starts to burn. So you know.
And sometimes you hope when you get back that the house is empty, right?
Right, like, oh, they all left, you know. The joke whenever my wife and I go somewhere, the kids will be like, where are you guys going? We're like, well, we're moving to Canada, best of luck. You know? They're like, ha. Like, one of these times, you know.
And they're looking out the window watching you go down the road.
They're gonna, like 5 hours later, they're gonna be.
Yeah.
Maybe you wasn't kidding.
Maybe they weren't kidding.
They weren't kidding about the whole Canada.
Yeah. So also, I think the other thing that some of us just come by more naturally is connecting emotionally through our stories, like wearing our heart on our sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
Well, I'm trying to think. When I write, I try. Is that what you're talking about? When you write, do you try to write that emotion, that how you're feeling about different things that happen to you and things like that?
Well, kind of inserting I mean, if it's a memory with the family,
right.
Inserting yourself as a person with, emotions that was impacted by the story
right.
versus just telling the story.
Yeah. And that tends to be the way I write, is more, instead of just this happened, my emotions on how I felt about that, because I know the times that I found letters, I've got a few letters, just a few little things that I appreciate that versus, I've got a calendar from my grandmother, and it's nice that I have her calendar with all the things that she was going to do. That's great and wonderful to have that information since I don't have anything else from her. But the other things that I get that have that information, that how they felt, what the emotions were, means so much more, because you get to know, like you were talking about, getting to know them. You get to know your ancestors. You get to know the people writing those letters, and how they felt about different things. I interviewed my grandmother. My grandfather died in World War II, and she'd never really spoken about it, but I interviewed her, and she started crying through the interview as we were talking. And this had been decades. This is World War II. I interviewed her in the 80s. And we'd never really talked about it. My mom says, my mom never talked about my dad. They just never had the conversations. And so I was able to talk to her, and she was speaking to me through that emotion that just got to her, and she was crying. And then I was able to share that interview with my mom. And so it just made so much more of a difference than the story of, yes, for my mom, my dad went to World War II and died on the island of Peleliu, versus listening to her mother talk about that experience and when she got the telegram and how she felt, and the love that she still had, after all those decades of her father. So it doesn't make such a big difference if you can put your emotion in there. It makes so much difference for whoever's going to read it later. But another thing I was going to tell you is, I recently talked to somebody who was having some issues with some stuff, some anxiety and things like that going on. And I said, well, why don't you journal it? Why don't you get it out and journal it? And they're like, I don't want anybody to read it. I said, rip it up afterwards. Just write it all down. So we're thinking about having if it doesn't rain on us, I have a little bonfire on New Year's Eve and write down all the junk that's happened to us over 2020 and throw it in that bonfire. And I think that'd be great. We could take some pictures, and that would be some good memories of, making it through the year and making it fun at the end. We're gonna not that the bell's gonna chime in 2021 and suddenly gonna be whoa, and everything is good. We're gonna wake up the next morning and everything is gonna be great. But I just think it will help to kind of, like you said, get the emotion out and just.
Yeah, I've had a grief counselor suggest that. I actually wrote a letter to my parents and I buried it at the point of their accident. But the grief counselor said, that was fine. But they also said sometimes people prefer to burn those letters, because they feel like the smoke kind of is symbolic of prayers going up or giving those concerns to the universe, versus burning it just to like destroy it because this is bad and we want it gone.
We're burning because it was bad, but there's both sides.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of writing can be symbolic, and even it does not all have to be shared. I say write first, and then you can decide if you want to share it or share any of it.
Well, there is something cathartic about writing. There really is. Yeah.
I'm not a real emotional person in my writing, but I've tried to make myself be, because I tend to see genealogists put their own emotions on their ancestors.
Yeah, we gotta be so careful.
And I've tried to discourage that from them, because they'll say, oh, well, my grandmother must have felt this. And I'm thinking, how do you know that? And then I think to myself, I don't want my descendants to say, well, my grandmother or great grandmother must have thought this. And I'm sitting here going, no, I didn't. And so it's like I want to leave my own emotions so that they know. Because
that's a great point.
Because I don't want people, 100 years from now to say, well, I wonder, she must have felt this way. Well, how do you know that if you didn't see it in writing or didn't see something that shows that? I mean, maybe I don't think like everybody else. Maybe I actually thought the opposite. And so I don't know. I have an aversion to people putting emotions and things on people when you don't have any proof or knowledge of it.
And we get that modeled for us in the Who Do You Think You Are type shows, that people will take a glimpse at a genealogical chart and say, oh, well, she must have felt this.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if they lost a child, they probably felt bad. But there's a lot of times. But yeah, I also know older people, when you interview them, it's like pulling hen's teeth. Oh, such and such happened. How did you feel about that? Good.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
I have no idea. Yeah, exactly.
Well, why do you want to know that?
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, do you have any tips or hints for us as we go to, we move into 2021 and we want to be better at it next year? How to set some goals? I mean,
if you are a person that is more productive when you set goals, set goals by all means. If you simply just want to be more intentional, I think you need to find your passion in this. Write what you're passionate about, or think about the connections. If it's just this good intention that's in the back of your mind, but it's not something that you're really invested in, it's going to be really hard to get that done. If you focus on the love, on the connections, and you enjoy it, just like you enjoy other aspects of genealogy, it gets to be, it's more of a hobby that you come back to. So personally, when I research, if I'm in a library, I'll put a clock on because it closes, right? But I mean, if you make it too much into a big, huge accomplishment, that can be as off-putting as it can be as an incentive.
I getcha. Yeah.
But yeah, and that accountability with another person. I mean, if you find a writing group or a writing partner, that can help so much, not just with getting it done, but with discussing the memories.
Yeah.
Our public library used to have a Wednesday morning, pre-pandemic, a Wednesday morning class, and we'd go in and she'd say, today we're going to talk about holiday traditions. And I was sitting in with this group of people that were raised in Detroit, and I learned all this stuff about the Detroit Thanksgiving parade. But all of us, because we discussed our memories for 15 minutes before we started writing, probably came up with a lot more to write about than if we had just brainstormed by ourselves.
I like this idea of a writing partner. I like that. Yeah, I love Melissa's idea of sending out the pictures. And I also love the idea of having that partner to, like it could be my mom. Mom, look at this picture. Tell me how you felt about everything going on. And I'll tell you what I remember from this picture, because I was a child when this happened, and so that would be really fun. Another fun thing we've done is we've gotten onto Google Earth, and we've gone and Googled all the places where we used to live. And because my dad was in the military. And so we'll just drive down the street and she'll go, oh yeah, and I used to go into the bakery over here. We take you to the park over here. So there's lots of different ways that we can trigger those memories. So it was really fun. We found a house we used to live in England, and she says, oh, I remember that front door. And then you'd walk up the stairs, and then we started pulling out pictures that she had taken when we lived there. So there's so many fun ways that we can do that.
And if they're close by, I love reenacting old photos.
Oh, yes.
If they're close by and you can all go back, and that can be a lot of fun.
Right. But, I was thinking as Melissa too was talking about those pictures, I could do the same thing with my kids, some of our old family photos and some of the crazy things that we used to do and say, hey, I found this photo. Because my husband's really good about, he's always changing his profile picture and his, all his stuff on Facebook. And he just throws up all these pictures. And sometimes my girls are like, why would you put that picture up there? So he's really good about that. But I'm thinking, man, what we should do is start sending them to them and say, okay, guys, tell me what you remember about this picture. And start.
That's a good idea for those of us who have adult children, or grandchildren that, we're always thinking about behind, but before us, doing the same thing with our children and grandchildren, going through that and seeing what their memories are. Because, even within families, siblings have different memories living in the same household.
And when they're 25, they tell you the things you never knew that happened.
Exactly.
Yes. Oh, don't they? And you're like, where was I? Oh, you were, I don't know, you're at the store or something.
Yeah.
My kids have a famous mop game that I didn't know anything about until they got older. And apparently my second son would sit them all in a line and they couldn't move. And it was a game he came up with, and he had the wet mop. And if they moved, he'd whack them in the face with the wet mop. And that game has been passed down now to grandchildren. I'm like, where was I? I never knew you did this. Well, you were probably at the store,
And you would have said no.
And I would have said no. So we only did this when you weren't home. And so you never know what kind of things you might find out from your children if you would just show them a picture and say what was happening here. Because you think you know what was happening there. Well, all this underlying stuff that somebody was pinching somebody.
Yeah, here's this picture. Tell me what I didn't know was going on.
Tell me what I didn't know what was going on. So my brain's going and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to start that on January 1st. My husband and I can start going through pictures and say, let's send this one out to everybody and get their, But I do have a daughter that will get upset and she'll say, well, I'm not in that picture. Well, you weren't born yet. She used to do that when she was little. Why am I not in that video? Or why am I not in that picture? Well, honey, you weren't alive. She used to get so upset with that. But so that's a family joke. Don't show this to her because she's going to be upset. She's not in it. So, of course, she's grown now, and so she's over that. But it's still a family joke. So,
but so my biggest advice is to connect to the project itself versus. Versus everything else that especially as we start 2021, I don't think any of us need any more pressure on ourselves.
No.
Unless we enjoy that pressure for some reason.
Exactly. Does anybody else have any thoughts and ideas about, treasuring these memories and collecting them, whether it's being better at taking photographs? I'm terrible. Like I did really good Christmas Eve at taking photos at my daughter's house. And then Christmas Day, I wasn't so good. We were so busy and involved. And then by Christmas dinner in the afternoon, I was tired. I didn't take a lot of pictures. And I'm thinking, I don't have any pictures. So
learn to draw.
Well, I think for people that are in my generation, at least, Facebook and Instagram have sort of become where we post all of our pictures for better or for worse. And so that's sort of a lot of our journals, and there's services that will print off your Facebook feed for you and things like that. But I think that's just as valid of a record as anything. I think that's something 25, 30 years from now will be something that a lot of genealogists are not only using Facebook for different groups, but also going back to look at ancestors' pages,
Right. And what I love about some of the Instagram pictures is it's about being in the moment and not about looking good.
Yeah.
So it's like our family, the funny thing was we didn't change out of our pajamas.
Oh, I love that.
To take that picture because, I mean.
It's 2020.
Right. It was about being in the moment, not about a pretty picture. So, of course, we took 7 just because one of us was going to have our eyes shut or whatever.
Okay, that's right.
But yeah,
no,
this has been fun. I think this is great.
I was going to tell Dan, and his point about Facebook is so true. And that's how I realized I didn't have any pictures, because I had nothing to post on Facebook about Christmas Day, because I took a few, but I just didn't. So I've got to be more intentional when I'm in the moment of getting some pictures, because then I get upset because I don't have, fun. I'm playing, games with them on the floor and I'm doing that kind of thing, but I've got to do a selfie or I've got something to help me remember that moment. So
I don't write it down and then you'll remember that moment. You were in that moment.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember the first time I felt really stupid as I took my new camera with the zoom lens to my son's track meet. It was one of his first ones and he won it. And I stood there yelling and cheering and never took a single shot.
Yeah, exactly.
But then later I decided that's fine because I was there. Right, I wasn't so busy documenting it that I wasn't there.
True. Because sometimes you're so busy doing the video camera or whatever that you're behind that lens and you're not.
Go play by yourself, honey. I got to upload some things.
Exactly. Exactly. So I love the idea, Laura. Find something that you feel passionate about, something that connects, that can help you. And so I think as we've talked, we probably each kind of went, oh, that'd be a good thing to do for next year. So, and we don't have to always do what everybody else is doing, because I think sometimes we beat ourselves up with, oh, so-and-so writes a journal every day and they write down everything that ever happened and they film everything and they, have pictures of every little thing. But sometimes it's just not, it doesn't work in our lives. So we need to find something that we can be consistent at doing that we think is fun. And I think you're right, Laura, that's how we'll move into 2021 and be better at doing what we want to do. And that's capturing our family memories, whether it's, writing our ancestor stories or writing our family stories now,
Writing your own stories, your own past.
Yeah. Exactly.
I always like to tell genealogy students when telling them to write their own stories, and they're all like, oh no, I don't want to write about myself, I don't want to do that. I say, fine, don't write it and let your children and your grandchildren write your story. How about that? See how you like that?
Yeah, not so much. you just never know what they might write. So.
Exactly. So you need to write it yourself.
Exactly.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
That's a scary point to think about your children and grandchildren writing a story about you, because think about, it's like you talked at the very beginning, Laura, about putting your grandmother in the grandmother, it's like, you're right, because I only knew my grandmother as my grandmother. I didn't know her as I later found out that she lied about her age to get married. And this woman never lied about anything, but she lied to get married about her age. And so, unfortunately, she passed before I got into genealogy. And so, it's difficult. That's the difficult part, is where you can't go back and talk to a lot of these family members and talk to them about the whys and the how comes and all these things that are not in documents. So right now, with you, your husbands, your children, your siblings, whoever is in your life, whoever is your family, write about them, write their stories, because they're not genealogists. They're not going to sit down and write them either.
No. Yeah, the rhythms of life, the rhythms of the relationships.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
Good or bad, ugly, write them down, because, when you're not here, who cares?
That's super. But you know what? Even the good, bad, and ugly, all of it teaches. It'll teach them something when they're going through those types of things. Let's be honest, they're going to go through hard times. They need to know that we went through hard times and that we made it through, And
that's what makes us strong.
It makes us strong, or information about what helped you get through this. Was it the Xanax or was it whatever? But
whatever it took.
Whatever.
Another glass of eggnog. I had 2 glasses of eggnog tonight.
There you go.
Sorry, I had to have it.
So, and those are good things for our children, our grandchildren to know, so that they feel normal when they're going through things. That they know that. Because sometimes we'll put our ancestors on a pedestal, they were perfect and all those kind of things. And, because a lot of the family stories will be, they're heroes and they're, whatever they may be, but they were real people too. And so we need to be able to teach people.
Want them to know that we were real people.
We were real
people.
We were real people.
Absolutely.
We were maybe not really perfect people.
But we were trying our best, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Laura, thank you so much. This has been really, really fun. I've appreciated all these ideas, and I've got to sit down and write a few things down, because I've had a few thoughts about what I want to do starting in 2020, so 2020, what else? I didn't even know what year it is, 2021. So what would be kind of fun
starting next week.
Starting next week, this is what I want to do. And what might be really fun is to do something at the end of the year next year to kind of see how we did on it, and if we were able to work through. You know, you guys need to ask me, did you send out the pictures and what did you learn? You need to keep me accountable for that. So
all righty.
Thank you so much. And we want to hear your ideas. What do you do? What has helped you capture family stories? What are you planning on doing for next year? We'd love to hear those ideas. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.